Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. I'm Steve Wyss. I'm joined, as ever, by Jonathan Fadugba. It's been a couple of weeks or so since we last did a main episode together. Jonathan, I know you've had a great time away in Europe on holiday. Great to have you back. I hope you're well.
Hi, Steve. Hi, everybody. Yes, not as ever, because I wasn't here on the last show, was I? So a bit of a break for me. I've been in Portugal, sunny Porto. I really enjoyed it, so I'm feeling sort of quite perky at the moment. And I'm really happy to be back on the show. Obviously, had a good season preview last week in Denmark. Well done to Henry, football in Denmark. So if you haven't listened to that, of course, go back. I definitely recommend it. You and Henry and yourself, Steve, did a really good job. I enjoyed that season preview, listening to it on my way back. But yeah, ready to go. It's a big period of the season at the moment in Sweden. We've hit the halfway point. Transfer window's open. There's a lot to talk about.
Yes, it was a very good season preview with Henry. Henry was top dollar on that show, I must say. Everything I threw at him, he had an answer for. And I caught him out with a couple of things, but he knows his stuff in that Danish league. It was a really good episode. Fully recommend anyone listens back to that one. But yes, we must talk about Sweden Norway now. We're going to start in Allsvenskan. And we're now at the exact halfway stage. A couple of teams have played 16 games, but I'm just going to briefly go through the results of the most recent round. Mjällby 2, Degerfors 1, Malmö 3, Sirius 1, Värnamo 2, IFK 3, controversial match there. Kalmar 1, Elfsborg 0, Helsingborg 1, Sundsvall 0. That must be Helsingborg's first win in quite a long time, I think. Häcken 1, Djurgården 2 in the clash at the top, and Varberg 0, Hammarby 3. And Norrköping 0, IFK Gothenburg 2. So I'm going to start off here, Jonathan. There was a match that really, there's a lot of talking points from Sunday. Värnamo 2, IFK 3. Briefly tell us the gist of things here and what everyone was talking about.
Yes, and later this week, we're going to have an exclusive interview with David Salini, assistant coach at Värnamo, not Varberg. And I really recommend you tune in for that as well, because it was a great interview, actually. And I'm looking forward to sort of releasing it and getting everyone's feedback. But in terms of Värnamo, yes, of course, they played the big dogs, AIK. First ever meeting between the two teams, obviously, in Allsvenskan football. Värnamo, that everyone knows their story by now, newly promoted, first time ever in this league. And they're doing a decent job of it, to be fair. We're going to talk a lot about Värnamo on that show coming up later this week with David. But yeah, it was an interesting game, Steve, to be honest. Obviously, first half major talking point was Jordan Guidetti, new signing from AIK, the big money man. He's come in to sort of replace Jordan Larson, and he got his first goal for the club. Neat finish inside the area, sort of right foot, just fired at home, sort of poacher's sort of forwards finish. A lot of expectations on his shoulders, I think, since joining in the summer. And it looked like AIK was sort of, going into half time. They looked, I wouldn't say comfortable, but they looked like they, maybe on track for a win. One thing about Värnamo, Steve, and, anyone who listens to this interview come in with David Salini and obviously the management team there, they're very tactically flexible, and they really sort of they're very proactive in game. Anyone watching this game, you'll have seen a lot of changes mid-game and things like that. And obviously I do ask David about that in the podcast coming. But yeah, they made a lot of changes, Värnamo, to their team tactically, and managed to get themselves back into the match, basically. Marcus Antonsson with an equaliser. And then Wanderson, the Brazilian, made it 2-1 with a sort of a neat goal. Maybe a keeper could have done slightly better. Maybe didn't see it. I'm not quite sure. But the major talking point of this game, Steve, really, and it's created a huge debate in Sweden. And I've been looking forward to talking about it, to be honest, since it happened on Sunday. Was what happened next. Now, Robin Tihi, he's a young AIK defender, centre-back, who has a huge future, I think. I've talked about him a few times, Steve. I think I'm not sure if he's been in my 10 to watch yet, actually, but he's been someone I've remarked on in previous shows over the years. I think he made his debut at 17. So he's been around the block for a few years now. Since the COVID season, I think he made his debut. And I was actually surprised AIK loaned him out for now. This is the second season they've loaned him out. Last season, he was at AFC Eskilstuna, and Ashley Coffey, in fact, played with him, and I think talked about him when we had Ashley Coffey on the show last season. If you go back and listen to that, the AFC Eskilstuna striker from England, he talked about Teehee, I think, a little bit, and when he was on loan there. And then this season, he's been loaned out again to Värnamo to get top division experience. But the big talking point here, Steve, was that there was some talk before the match. Should Teehee be playing against AIK, who he obviously plays for? And everyone was like, well, it's fine. Shouldn't be a problem. He's professional. I'm sure he'll give it his all against his current team, his parent club. But it couldn't have gone much worse for the lad, unfortunately. An absolute howler own goal in the 55th minute to equalise for AIK. Obviously, that's his team. So technically speaking, he scored for his club, but he's not playing for that club at the moment. He's playing for Värnamo. And then made it even worse in the 69th minute. Stefanelli got the winning goal, but again, it was an absolute howler from Teehee. Miscommunication between him and the goalkeeper for Värnamo, and basically just ended up giving a tap into Stefanelli. So not only was the own goal a nightmare for Teehee, but also the intervention to basically make it 3-2 completely changed this game, turned it on its head. There was a few comments on Twitter at the time from people. I was obviously live tweeting this game. And, a couple of people even remarked it in tweeters, it's pretty much saying his head's gone. And it was just a really unfortunate situation for Teehee. I think that, there's been a lot of post-match talk. I did even ask David about this on the podcast coming. So tune in, stay tuned for that podcast later when I asked them the opinions of him and obviously the manager, Kim Hellberg. But yeah, just to briefly sort of talk about, Hellberg came out after the match and as I said, there's no doubt about him. He's a great professional footballer. He's probably the saddest player on the pitch that we didn't win today. He will play on the bigger stage and this will make him better. We are there for him if needed. I think the sporting director, Enes Ahmetovic, I believe his name is as well, came out on Twitter and basically said that if his children grow up to be half as professional as Teehee, then he'll have done a good job as a parent. And that's a huge sort of testament to Teehee and the impact he's made at Värnamo. I think he's made a lot of friends. He's a good player. I think he's got a good future, but this was a real nightmare for him. And obviously, Steve, it opens up that debate. Should loan players be allowed to play against their parent club?
Yes, I've seen the goals here that Teehee gave away. The own goal was, well, I mean, I can see why there's a few conspiracy theories, you could say it's accidental, but it just looked a bit dodgy to me. And the second one, I think by then, supposedly, his head had gone a bit. And I've seen that sort of error been made before, for sure. But do you know what? It reminded me of an incident actually 7 years ago. I was looking at it today, and it was an Ajax goalkeeper called Mickey van der Hart, who was on loan at Go Ahead Eagles. And in the 89th minute, the match was 1-1. And he made a horrendous error. He miskicked the ball. Like the England goalkeeper did in Croatia that time. Was it Robinson or someone like that? And it enabled Ajax to win the game. And there was loads of conspiracy theories there after that one. Now, of course, in the Dutch leagues, you're not allowed to ban your loanee from playing against you. It's a part of the rule, unless there's like a gentleman's agreement, of course. And I think it might be the same in Sweden. I'm not sure. I don't like it, I must say. I think it puts a lot of pressure on the player needlessly. There's going to be a conflict of interest. I don't know exactly how close he is to AIK. Maybe they're the club of his heart. It's going to be really difficult for the lad. And I'll be honest, I don't like it. If I was a manager, I'm not sure I would put my player in that position. I know he's probably quite important to Värnamo, but I think I would just leave him out because it's just asking for trouble. And I kind of feel a bit sorry for him, really.
Yeah, and David Salini's come out in the interview. Not spoil. Hopefully, not too many spoilers of the interview. It's a great listen. I really hope you enjoy it as a listener. But he said that they didn't have anyone else that they could have put in. It would have made the team significantly weaker if he hadn't played. That was kind of his rationale. I tend to lean towards what you say, Steve. To be honest, I don't agree with it. I think that it should be. I think there's integrity questions there. I tweeted about it on the, in the game on my personal account and just sort of said that I just think there's too much of an integrity issue. If you look at the own goal from Teehee, he's clearly off balance a little bit. And the keeper, I saw one tweet saying that the goals were the keeper's fault, which, you can see an argument for that as well, I guess, to a certain extent. He comes flying off his line. And Teehee looked kind of off balance, but it's just so unfortunate. And I think the problem is that, as as happens these days in this world we live in, Steve, and this digital age we live in, Teehee has just got a load of crap on social media. You know, people probably AIK rivals, etc., have come at him. Maybe I don't think Värnamo fans necessarily, they're not the biggest fan base, but and I'm sure they support him as well. You know, in terms of how good he's been for them. But you know, fans of other clubs, if you look at Diff fans, Hammarby fans, you know, I bet they're probably on his case, Teehee. And you know, people have been calling him Agent Teehee and saying job done and things like that. It's just an unpleasant situation for the player to be in, because you're going to give your all. I'm not questioning for 1 minute his professionalism, but at the end of the day, he's an academy player for AIK, and he's been put in an awkward situation where if you make a mistake, the scrutiny is 100 times more than it normally would be. So I can see why there's an argument that, you know, there was someone tweeting me saying that, well, if you think about it, a club could just sort of buy loads of players and loan them all out to their rivals, and then they couldn't play against them, and it gives them an advantage. But you can easily, my answer to that was, you could easily put a rule in just saying, you know, maximum loans of X amount per league. You know, you can only loan out, let's say, 4 players per league per season. And if you want to loan anyone else out, it has to go to a lower division or a foreign team. That would solve the problem fairly easily, I think, from that point of view. I just think that I'm not questioning for 1 minute Teehee. I'm not questioning Värnamo. I think that if you've got the player in your squad, you're obviously going to trust him to do the job. And it is unfortunate. I think there was an incident with an AIK player. I can't remember who it was. I think it's a goalkeeper. I think the goalkeeper from Mjällby is on loan from AIK, and he had an absolute blinder. And some people were saying, well, why couldn't he have done that for us? You know what I mean? When they played AIK. So, you know, sometimes your loan, you know, your parent player, your loan player, sorry, will have a blinder against you. It can go either way. But the problem is that when you have this sort of incident, you know, that when I saw it, you know, the last thing you wanted from this game was like a howler own goal from Teehee. When it happened, I was just like, oh no, here we go. You know, you just knew like straight away. And then, you know, the second one is just like I think maybe you could argue the keeper's a little bit more at fault, but as you mentioned there, Steve, basically his head's more or less gone, hasn't it? I mean, there was a comment someone actually tweeted at the time while I was, while I was watching the game, and basically said, I think Stuart Kelly, he said he's having an absolute mare. Surely you'd take him off. His head's gone. And, you know, he tweeted us at the time of the incident, said, you know, at Nordic football, why is there no law in place to stop players playing against their employers? And of course, that's not the rule in Sweden. You can play against your employers. So, yeah, it's a tough one. But I think if you just look at like the player welfare point of view, I just think that this is a bit unnecessary for Teehee. And I think maybe if the rule was that you couldn't play against a team, then it would just kind of delete any kind of conspiracies that might come out.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it really does put into question of whether this should be allowed. It doesn't suit both ends of the parties, in my opinion. And it's definitely something to look at, I think, going forward. As I say, I just feel sorry for the player that's been put in that situation. It's just not fair on him, really. And these things can unfortunately happen sometimes. We're going to move on.
Steve, you say it doesn't suit either party, but I mean, if you look at it for like just purely statistical based, Värnamo's chances of winning without Teehee probably would have decreased that 4 or 5%. You know, he's been one of their best centre backs this season. So, you know, I get what you're saying, but you can also argue from Värnamo's point of view, anything that would increase their chances of winning, they're going to go for it, right? That you couldn't predict this happening.
But then you've got a player who's come through the AI Core Academy. He might have a conflict of interest in his mind. He's like, hold on a minute. He probably cheers for AIK in every other match. He wants them to win the title. He's on that field. I don't care how he's a young lad, and you've got to be professional. But it must be really hard sometimes. And he's thinking, you know what? Do I really need to be at my absolute best today? It's an awful thing to say, but it could. Who knows of someone's mindset? I think.
Yeah, but I think that. I mean, that's a very harsh thing to say. I think, Steve, to be honest, like you're questioning someone's integrity there. I think that's.
Well, you just don't know, do you? There are a lot of questions. I can see why there was a lot of conspiracy theories. I'm not for 1 minute suggesting this was deliberate or anything like that. But I'm just saying it could. It's just he's been put in a very difficult position. That's all I'm trying to say. Yeah,
that's a fair point. I mean, it's an unpleasant one, I think, like you've said there as well for the player. Like you're just in an uncomfortable situation all round. Someone on a more lighthearted note tweeted us and said, "Does he get a goal bonus for AIK? Is it in his contract? Because technically he scored a goal." So yeah, it's just it's a major talking point this week. As I mentioned, Kim Helberg's come out and Värnamo have rounded behind him. And obviously Bartosz Grzelak has come out as well and said, ARK sporting director came out and said it's terrible. I know Robin very well, and he's a bloody professional guy who doesn't deserve this at all. And it's really unfortunate he ends up in this situation. But then it's probably one of those, frowny faces, and then behind the camera you kind of secretly got a little grin on your face, because to be honest, this has kept ARK in the title race. If they'd have lost to Värnamo, that'd have been a massive blow in the title race. If we look at the table now, that put ARK up to third place. Those 2 extra points would have had them, down in fifth if they hadn't sixth. Sorry, if they hadn't won this game, 5th or 6th anyway. But so basically, they're now only 2 points off the top of the table on the back of this result. So even just ignoring the Teehee incident, this was a huge win for ARK, to be honest. And they kind of got out of jail, if I'm being honest. If you look at the XG stats, Värnamo had 65% possession in this game, had way more passes completed than ARK, and actually managed more shots on target than ARK. So let's just say they've got out of jail on this one.
They've done well, actually, at IFK, because they had a rough run, and they've come back with a 1-0 win against Kalmar, and then that 3-2 against Värnamo. They're staying in the race. It looks a heck of a title race at the moment, by the way, Jonathan. Genuine 5-way battle, I would say, for the Allsvenskan crown this season. It looks absolutely. It's going to be really interesting, this title battle. And we're now going to move to the big game, which happened in Hinstingen on Sunday. Häcken against Djurgården. Now, you were at this game, Jonathan. Sorry, you were watching this game. I bet you wish you were at it.
I wish.
Sorry, I know you were watching it.
Mentally, I was definitely at this game. In terms of,
yes, and
physically, unfortunately not.
A really big result for Djurgården here. What was your assessment on this match?
Yes, I mean, it's funny you slipped there, because to be honest, I used to live near the Bravida Arena, obviously Häcken, and these are the games that I would have definitely been out there if I was lucky enough to still be in Sweden. I mean, this is the sort of game I would have lived for. It was it looked like a capacity crowd, to be honest. The atmosphere was brilliant. The Diff fans really brought a lot of passion, and I can't remember what song they were singing, but
their end looked absolutely packed.
Yeah, I've been at Häcken games against big clubs, and like the away end, they will absolutely. I mean, I think it was Malmo I went to see Häcken Malmo once. I think it was the first ever game I saw in Sweden, in fact. And I think it was the year Malmo won the title, and just the away end, I was like, this is unreal. This is insane. Like they're just constant singing and noise. And to be fair, Häcken aren't the biggest team, but they, in terms of fan base, in Gothenburg, but they also seem to pack out the home end as well. So it really lent for like a brilliant match. It was a top of the table clash. Häcken have been top of the table for some weeks now, and they've got a game in hand as well. So this was their chance to really kind of stamp their authority on this title race, to be honest. Unfortunately, they've not managed to do it. A 2-1 defeat in the end, and it's gone Diff's way. First time Häcken have lost since April. Obviously, they've only lost 2 games this season. One was to IFK in a derby. So it's a second home defeat. They haven't lost away from home yet this season. And Diff turned it round, to be fair to them. Jeremiev with a penalty. I think it was definitely a penalty. Hamar Ekdal, a bit clumsy on, I think it was Berggren, can't remember now, but a bit clumsy of a foul. Just kind of caught him a little bit. Jeremiev buried it and got his 15th goal of the season. He's having an incredible campaign. And I know he scored a lot of penalties, but he's almost, I think he scored almost double the next best goal scorer in the league. So he's really having a fantastic season. But second half, it all turned around. I think Djurgården made some clever tactical changes, to be honest. Emmanuel Banda came in and scored. I think it was from a corner as well, just a little move and then a goal. And then Elias Andersson belted one home, left-footed, behind the Djurgården fans at that end of the pitch. Ran off to the fans and they were going mad. I can't remember what the song they were singing now, but yesterday it was in my head all day, basically. After the game, it was, they really were seriously giving it, the Diff fans. And I think that obviously the joint managers made a good little kind of Lagerlof and Bergstrand. They did a good job, I think, to be honest. The second half, they opened up the pitch a bit more, brought on a few substitutions like Joel Asoro, and just went for pace and kind of tried to counter-attack Häcken once they got that lead. Just sat a little bit deeper and basically countered them. First half, I thought they actually controlled the game quite well in large spells in terms of possessional territorial dominance over Häcken. Häcken got out at times, had some good chances. Blair Turgott on his right foot, playing on the left-hand side. I think he missed a good chance, and he missed 1 or 2 chances, actually, to be honest. Häcken have lost a few players, which I think is going to be a problem for them in the title race. There's a strong rumour that Berggren might be leaving to, I think, Poland. So this may even have been one of his last games for the club. And they've lost Leo Bengtsson. He's gone to Cyprus. I know we're going to talk about transfers in a minute. But, that's quite a big loss as well, I think, Bengtsson, to be honest. They have brought in one or two themselves, Simon Gustafsson from Utrecht, who should do a good job for them, to be fair. And maybe we'll just replace Berggren like for like. But I think this is a big opportunity lost for Häcken in the title race. And I think it's a big win for Djurgården.
Yeah, I was just looking at the stats for this game. First half, ball possession, 62% for Djurgården. But really what caught my eye was Häcken only had 3 attempts on goal in that first half. Now, normally they batter teams with shots and attempts and things like that. And it just seemed, though they were 1-0 up, that they weren't having much of the ball. Second half, though, it's flipped, like you said, and Djurgården only 40% of the ball, but they were arguably more threatening. So interesting sort of tactical tweaks there. But Häcken, I mean, my big problem for them is they just can't keep clean sheets, Jonathan. I mean, they outscore most teams, but ultimately, if you're going to win a title, you've got to be able to shut that defense up sometimes, haven't you? And they just don't seem to have that ability. But I mean, to be fair to them, it's the first real major slip up they've made, isn't it, for quite some time? So, maybe we can sort of let them off as a one-off, but it could be a big turning point, this one.
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is that Djurgården's bench is absolutely stacked. They made use of all 5 substitutes. Marcus Danielson's back in Allsvenskan, the title-winning captain and hero of a few years back. I used to rave about him on this podcast, didn't I, Steve? And he got his move, and then he moved to China as well. And he's back now, and he came off the bench and got a hero's reception from those away fans. They're delighted to have him back. I think he even commented post-match saying it was emotional for him, the reception he got. Like I say, they used all 5 subs. Magnus Eriksson wasn't even on the pitch. He was on the bench, came on. Joel Asoro came on. Pierre Bengtsson, obviously. They got options, real options, diff now. And defensively, they're not the best defensively. I mean, I think from an XG against point of view, they're quite good, but they do leak some goals at times. But if you look at like player for player, they're stacked. They've got some really good players. Isaac Heen, I think, will probably be one that will get a move very soon. So, yeah, you're right. I mean, I think they made full use of the subs, and I think they got the subs right and the tactics right from that point of view. Häcken, like you mentioned, I don't want to rule them out too early, but I think that championship-winning teams don't lose this sort of key game at home with a 1-0 lead. I think it's a bad omen for them in terms of the title. I think they got a lot of challenges to come. They play Elfsborg away next. They still got to go to AIK. Still got to go to IFK, obviously, in the derby. They've got Malmo at home to come. Their run isn't actually that bad second half of the season, but, those games will be tests for them. But it's just a case of, like you said, is their defense good enough? Not entirely sure. Will they keep Berggren? Probably looks unlikely. And of course, the good news for them, obviously, in Häcken's point of view, Steve, there was a lot of rumours Jeremiev might be leaving. And I think even Diff or Malmo might have made a bid. Or one of the big clubs in Sweden apparently was looking at him. I think there's a release clause in there somewhere. But the good news for him is he's kind of agreed to stay for the rest of the season. I think they've locked off that release clause and now renegotiated it a little bit. So that's massive for them. Obviously, he's top scorer in the league, having a brilliant season. Did a very funny sort of weird dance when he scored the goal. I don't know the backstory behind that one. But it's bad. I think it's bad vibes when you lose at home in such a massive game. They've got a lot to do now from here, I think. I think Djurgården look extremely strong, and I know I said Malmo would win the league at the start of the season, but I think the scales are slightly tipping, in my opinion, now, just based on how strong Djurgården look in almost every area of the pitch.
They're like a train at the minute. They've won 7 consecutive games in all competitions. They actually came into this match on the back of a win in the Conference League against Rijeka from Croatia. So, I mean, Häcken even had that in their favour, facing a side who've been on the road travelling, and yet they still came out second best. But still, for me, a good first half of the season for Häcken, 31 points from 15 games. If they repeat that in the second half of the season, I think that'll win them the title. 62 points will win you the title, I think, considering there's so many teams in the race. But it's
one little thing before, just to wrap up on that. I think that from a tactical point of view of the match, I think one of the key things that happened in this game that nearly turned it back in their favour, Häcken, was the introduction of Ali Yusuf. I thought he would look really good for them. Came off the bench in early second half for Udenas, and yeah, he looked really good. He cutting onto his right foot from playing on the left hand side, nearly got an equaliser, nearly won a penalty as well for them, and sort of really good dribbling onto his right foot and shooting in and around the box, and nearly managed to get them back into the match single-handedly almost. But just unfortunately, I think Turga had some good chances, but they just didn't quite create enough really. And I think what will be interesting now is to see if Berggren stays. And like you say, that back line is just a little bit. It's like you say, they don't get many clean sheets. So, like you say, brilliant season so far for Häcken. You can't really knock them. And Pierre-Mathieu Hogmo has done a fantastic job in turning them around since last season. But work to be done still.
Okay, well, maybe a bit more on the title race later, but I know you're very interested in talking about a lot of transfers in this particular episode, Jonathan. The Swedish window, I think, shuts on the 13th of August, I do believe. The window's not even open in Norway yet officially, but in Sweden it's been underway, and plenty of ins and outs at the moment. Where on earth do we start here, Jonathan? Tihi Transfers or Malmo? They've been very active at the moment. I know you've been tweeting a lot about them recently. So, yeah, transfers.
Yeah, we have to get into transfers. I mean, there's still been a lot of big news since I was last on the show. Obviously, I was away the week before, and there was some big stuff going on there. I mean, Rickard Norling's left Norrköping, so we've got that to talk about. But I think transfers, I have to say, Steve, I don't think I can remember so many midsummer transfers, and I don't think I can remember teams spending so much money from Sweden incomings. Usually there's a ton of outgoings. This is the first time where I can really think to myself, there's some serious money being spent in incomings at the moment. I think according to Transfermarkt, roughly £6 million has already been spent, and that's not including undisclosed fees. Now for Sweden, if you take that into context, that's quite a lot, especially for mid-season. We're not talking the whole season here. I think there's been previous seasons where that's been like the maximum for the whole season. So there's a lot going on. I mean, what do you want me to? How do you want to do this, Steve? Do we want to kind of run? Do you want me to run through some of them?
Let's run through some big ones, both ins and outs. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously, I think the only team that hasn't signed anyone is Kristiansund. Everyone else has been slightly active to some degree. AIK been very obviously active in terms of bringing in John Guidetti. I know it's a free transfer, but he'll be on big money. That could be something that could change the title race slightly. I think they've lacked that kind of reliable goal scorer. And if he can get that job done, then that's a big boon for them. As I mentioned with Diff, they've got Marcus Danielson. He's come back from China now. He's 33, but still a valuable player and leader, I think, of that dressing room. So almost a good omen as well. Last time he was there, they won the league. Is it even just that omen could help? If you look at, for example, Elfsborg, they brought Niklas Hult from Hanover. He's 32 now, left back, to replace Oliver Zander. Now he's a left back who's been sold to Toulouse for 1.35 million. Really promising left back. He had a really good season, the first half of the season, and obviously done enough to get a move to Liga, the young 20-year-old. They've also brought in Sebastian Holman, who's a bit of an experienced player as well from Elfsborg, from Turkey, 30 years old. Again, he'll be on sort of decent money. IFK Göteborg, Suleiman Abdullahi, centre forward from Union Berlin, another one who's sort of quite big money, quite big name. Wilhelmsen has, of course, left. He's gone to Darmstadt. And that's quite a big move, I think, for him. We talked about Slavia Prague and rumours going to Cheshire, but he's the academy player, was in my 10 to watch, of course. He's now moved to Germany for about 1.5 million, as I said, 1.35 million. Hammarby, Steve. I mean, we need this whole section to talk about Hammarby. They're spending that Swedberg money in bucket loads. Sold Astrid Selmani. I think he's had a nightmare season, and I think the only time really I talked about him on the podcast this season was when he missed that dreadful penalty against Malmo in the cup final. Just didn't quite work out for him. He was so good at Varberg. There was a lot of fanfare about him when he chose his move to Hammarby. So many clubs wanted him, but I don't know. This season's just not worked out for him. It seems like Martis Fuentes didn't really rate him at the end of the time there. He's been sold to Israel, Hapoel Beersheva, for nearly £1 million. But they've made some serious signings, Steve. Veton Berisha from Viking, done, 1.8 million. We'll talk about him, I guess, maybe in part 2 or now, and how that will impact Viking. Shaquille Pinas, or is it Pinas? I don't know. Ludo Goretz, £720,000 signed. Played today against Varberg boys. He's an experienced player, good big money again. Pavle Vagic has come back from Rosenborg. He used to play for Malmo. 22-year-old, 630k done. Abdelrahman Saidi, Degerfors, 450k done. Thought to be going to Malmo. Hammarby came in, swooped and signed him. David Concha, a young, 25-year-old winger from Spain. Obviously, Cifuentes tucking into his contacts there from Badajoz, but also formerly of Real Sociedad. So he actually came off the bench today for Hammarby and looked quite lively. Very technical, kind of typically Spanish, kind of very good close control dribbling. He looked lively, maybe one to watch. They've also dipped into the Ghanaian market, bought a centre-back Nathaniel Ajay, undisclosed fee. So big moves from Hammarby mid-season. Dennis Widgren's left as well. Bjorn Poulsen's left as well, gone to Denmark. I think you mentioned him on the Danish season preview. I heard Henry saying about him, and I sort of felt like interjecting in the middle of the podcast, but obviously I wasn't there. But yeah, he's gone to Denmark Odense. Widgren's gone to Sirius. Even teams like Helsingborg, sorry I'm going on a bit. If you want to interrupt me at any point, please do, Steve. But Helsingborg have bought Thomas Rognir, formerly of IFK Göteborg. He's back now in Sweden. He's been playing in Greece. I saw a lot of him when he was in Gothenburg, and I think that's a decent sort of signing to shore up that back line of Helsingborg. Valtzetas left Häcken on loan and has gone to Helsingborg as well.
Even Värnamo have spent nearly $500,000 on a player.
Yep.
Ashden Zelkovich from Ogrit.
Yeah, and he's been fantastic at Ogrit. He's been their best player pretty much, and they're having a really rotten season. So yeah, they're splashing the money. Wiedesheim Paul has also joined from Rosenborg on loan to Helsingborg. So yeah, I mean, obviously you mentioned Malmo. I'll wrap it up with Malmo because I could talk about every single team really. There's been so much activity, but let's wrap it up with Malmo because they and this could be a good talking point because potentially for the title race, this might actually, number one, save the manager his job, and number two, get them back in the race because they've started to look a lot better. And I think the main reason behind that is Mustafa Zaidan. It was in our 10 to watch, Steve. If you go back on patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast and sign up for that 10 to watch Patreon on Allsvenskan, I did say I think this will be his breakout year, and it has been. He's earned a move from Sirius to Malmo for nearly £750,000 roughly, and he's already contributed 5 goals, Steve, in 2 games. 2 goals, I think 3 goals, 2 assists, if I'm right in saying, in 2 outings. He's completely transformed their team. Mahame Sibi, we talked about all the huge bad news, Steve. He's out for the season now. He's only just joined them. But he got a hip injury at the weekend. Really, it looked like quite a bad injury, actually, and he's had surgery already. But I can't let this section end without mentioning the man, the myth, the legend. He's back in Sweden. Mohamed Buya Toure, Steve, is back in Sweden from
Your
China.
Man is back.
And the man who helped fired Djurgården to the title is back in Sweden, but in Malmo colours, a huge transfer. And I think potentially that could be a game changer in the title race.
Yeah, there's been a lot of transfers in and out here. Malmo actually sold Arnel Amihodzic to Sheffield United for $4 million. Came back from the loan at Bordeaux. That's decent money. I think that was always guaranteed anyway in some form, wasn't it? It was going to be sold, but they've certainly reinvested some of that money. Shame about CB. I didn't actually know he was ruled out for the rest of the season. So that's £1 million down the drain, isn't it? But Zidane has started like a rocket, hasn't he, at Malmo? He's had a really couple of great games domestically, I think, for sure. But I think for me, Hammarby, obviously the big pick out here of 4 new signings in. Obviously, they lost Swedberg, got good money for him. They got nearly $1 million for Selmani, which I think is fair play considering his poor form. But I don't know how good this Pinias is. A centre-back from Ludo Goretz. Maybe he could be a difference maker for them. Berisha is a guaranteed goal machine if he stays fit. I'll say that. And Saidi, actually, he impressed both of us, hasn't he, at Degerfors this year? So, I mean, what do you put this down to, Jonathan, in general? You might not even know the answer to this, but the amount of money being splashed around, it's almost like a bit of a boom. Is it because that clubs are actually there has been some money in as well, and they're actually willing to spend it.
Yeah, I think this is maybe the sort of release of the last few years since COVID. I think maybe there's an element of clubs have kind of kept that money. There's been a lot of money coming to Allsvenskan in the last 2-3 years. If you look at even the Swedberg deal, 4.5 million. There's a lot of money burning the holes of clubs like Hammarby's pockets at the moment. Like you just mentioned there, Hodzic, 4 million. Malmo have got that Champions League money, so they've been able to sort of splash out, and that filters down. Obviously, Sirius getting in nearly £1 million, or £750,000 for Zidane. That allows them. That's huge for their budgets. Teams like Sirius, that allows them to then go and maybe strengthen a little bit as well, and go into their coffers. So I think there's a bit of a trickle down effect. I think there's a bit of a COVID effect, maybe, just in terms of clubs have been saving up money. I remember last year, Steve, the trend was kind of a lot of teams signing players from third division and things like that, and internal transfers. So maybe that kind of, maybe they've been saving up a little bit. They haven't really splashed out as much to get through COVID. And now it's like, well, listen, we got the money. And I think the other factor, Steve, I think you touched on it earlier when we were talking about the title race. This is a 5-way title race at the end of the day. This is, it's up for grabs now type thing, isn't it? You've got Malmo 30 points. Yeah. You've got Hammarby 30 points. You've got AIK 31 points, Häcken 31 points, and Djurgården 33 points. And you mentioned the genuine 5-way title race. I actually agree with you. And, Kalmar aren't quite going to do it in 6 points further back. But those other 5 teams can all genuinely think we've got a chance of winning this title here for different reasons, whether it's diff and the amount of goals they score, whether it's, Hammarby, how few goals they concede, that kind of thing. Whether it's Häcken on their day who can blow teams away, beat Gibsons 5-1 last week before this defeat. Everyone's got a rationale. Malmo are champions, but they're 5th, and they're only 3 points off it. They're well within their rights, especially with all these transfers now, to think we can get back into it. So I think maybe that's also, clubs are probably thinking to themselves, let's go for it. Let's roll the dice here, and it's sort of now or never, really, if we're going to win. I mean, if you look at someone like Hammarby, only one title in their history. Why not spend that Swedberg money? That could if that gets you our second ever league title, Cifuentes goes down as a legend. If you look at, Diff, for example, they've got such a strong squad now. They want the title back. AIK with Guidetti, they've been actually a bit conservative, AIK. I still expect maybe 1 or 2 more deals for them potentially. But I think it's partly that as well. Maybe the sense that this is our year, maybe we've got to go for it. And Malmo maybe not quite being at their best this season. It's kind of like there's a window there for someone.
We had a question in from Luis de Almeida for this episode, and you've answered some of this already, Jonathan. I just wondered if you wanted to add anything more. He says, things have started to click for Djurgården, especially after thrashing Malmo in May. In general, how do you analyse or credit such a strong sequence while Häcken, Hammarby and Malmo have already shown signs of inconsistency? I don't know if you've got anything much to add there about either of those 4 teams.
Yeah, it's a great question, Louise, and always thanks for your support. I know you're a loyal supporter of the podcast, so it's great to hear from you. I think personally that this weekend I just started thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? I think Diff might win the league. Actually, I think they've got a real chance of winning the league. Obviously not won it for, I think it was 2019 they last won a title with 66 points. They're currently on 33 with 14 games to go. Best defensive record in the league joint, obviously. Scored the most goals in the league. I think they have a genuine chance of winning this title. The run of games to come is challenging. They've got a bit of an easy run now, but then once you get to October time, obviously they've got AIK at home, Malmo away. They've still got, that derby kind of thing to get over, but it's kind of opening up for them a little bit, to be fair. They don't have a huge amount of big challenges left to come. And I just thought that the way that they navigated that, I felt like the way they navigated that game against Häcken was very impressive from a tactical point of view. I just feel like they've got a strong squad. They're quite stacked. I think they'll rotate a fair amount. Edvardsson sort of started to come into it a little bit more. I criticised him, but he is getting better and better, I think. Radetinak is having a real impact. Gustav Wickheim, a Sorrow off the bench, or sometimes when he starts, adds that injection of pace. The midfield is strong. I mean, Eriksson couldn't even get in the team. I think, obviously with the European game in mind, they've gone to Croatia and got a result at Rijeka. I think defensively they're quite strong. There's still a few question marks there maybe to overcome. But I think that their ability to change things on the bench is something really big. And obviously they've won 6 in a row now, since they beat, obviously, Malmo 4-0 in May. They've only lost 1 game, and that was against Kalmar. So they're really sort of moving into sort of full steam. The only other team I think from tonight, watching Varberg against Hammarby and watching the way that Hammarby kind of dispatched them, I think that if their new signings can click Hammarby, then I think they've also got a very, very strong chance. That wobble has really cost them, I think, though. I think they could arguably have 6 points that they should have easily collected, that they didn't. If you look at, for example, I think, Värnamo, losing to Värnamo away. I mean, Värnamo, a good solid team, but you're expecting them to maybe do slightly better there. 1 or 2 other results that they probably think they might feel that they could have done better. The derby, for example, just not quite going their way against Djurgården. Excuse me. So, I think Hammarby, although Malmo were my pre-season tip, I think Malmo, a lot's going to depend now on Buya Toure, and how Sibi is a massive blow for them, I think, because he brought midfield steel. Zidane, he's having an incredible impact. What can he do? But yeah, I think to answer your question, Louise, I think Djurgården are really looking like a strong train of a team, and they might take some stopping.
Yes, thanks very much for your question there. Now, I'll tell you one team that's not going to win the title, Jonathan, and that is Norrköping. And this is no surprise to you, of course. Pre-season, they were kind of your tip to be underachiever almost, weren't they? And it's cost Rickard Norling his job. Now, what do you make of this sacking? Do you think it was a fair dismissal? Do you think it's the right decision? And where did Norrköping go from here?
Yeah, good question. And well, I don't know actually, really. They've lost against IFK Göteborg at home tonight, so that's a big blow.
I know a lot of people expect them to win that, didn't they, as well?
Yeah, I mean, normally you would think that Norrköping would get something. They're losing players as well. Philip Dargashai, he's only just come back. I mean, sometimes I feel like it's a holiday. I feel like it's kind of like it's like going traveling, isn't it? On a gap year, you sort of come back to Sweden for a bit, relax, and then go back on your travels. He's leaving. I think it's looking like to Poland, potentially. I'm not entirely sure. Might be right, but so yeah, there's just a lot of problems at Norrköping at the moment. The decision to get rid of Norling, I think, was maybe it had been coming. It's the results have not been going well. We talked about them on the last show I was on, and just sort of saying how things weren't going well, and maybe he might be under pressure. I did predict them that they'd have a tough season. They're still looking for a replacement coach. So at the moment, Hannes Mavrak and Vedran Vucevic are kind of sharing that kind of joint interim manager role. So they haven't got a new manager yet after a week or two. Neither of them, I think, have got their pro license, so they're actually not allowed to be managers for the rest of the season, even though Jonathan Levi's come out and said he would like them to be in charge. So it just seems like, it just doesn't seem great for Norrköping at this moment in time. I feel a little bit sorry for Norling because I think he's got good intentions. I think he's a decent manager, all things considered, but it just doesn't seem to sort of really have worked out there for him. I think they struggled with getting that balance, I think, of kind of, the formation that they play. I think they struggled to get that blend, and maybe just didn't quite have enough firepower. They've had issues as well. You can't ignore the difficulties that they face. With the off-field issues that they've had with Christopher Kazani. I think that's the human tragedy that you can't really overlook. How does that impact the squad? But ultimately they came to a decision to go their separate ways. They said the results haven't corresponded to the association's goals, and he's been relieved of his duties. They hope that the team can have new energy and perform for the rest of the season. But it's going to be a year of. It's going to be. I don't think they won't get relegated, but it's just going to be a year of kind of stagnation, I think, for Norrköping. I mentioned on the last time we spoke about them that they've had so many players leave and so many people, even staff leave the club, chief scout, everyone, directors and stuff like that, that it's a real period of turbulence for Norrköping. I think they need some stability for the next year or two, maybe 16 months. I guess it was just one of those ones. Even Norling came out and said, he really fought hard to stay. He said he really wanted to stay, and he feels really bad about leaving. And he said he's got a good relationship with the supporters. He's really sad. Obviously, with the pandemic, he said he hasn't really had a chance to kind of get the club under his skin. He says he loves the club, and he's proud to be at Norrköping. But ultimately, he said, "I've packed my bags. I've come as far as I can. I'm a soccer coach. I'm a football coach who loves it more than anything, except my wife. And we'll see what happens." So I don't think we've heard the last of him, but it's the end of Rikard Norling at Norrköping.
Yeah, this is kind of what I was going to say. Where does this leave Rikard Norling now? Because he doesn't just suddenly become a bad manager overnight, doesn't he? It just feels like it hasn't worked out. He's 51 years old. You could say now he's entering sort of his prime as a manager. I always say sort of 50 to 60 years old is often the prime for a manager in many respects. But yeah, it always staggers me, the lack of clean sheets that he had here at Norrköping. He was so known for it at IFK, but he just couldn't seem to get a system down. Do you expect him to be back in management fairly soon, or do you reckon it's a sort of thing start of next season you could see him rocking up somewhere at an Allsvenskan club?
I think it will take a while. I'm not sure if we'll see him this season, but I think he won't struggle for a club. No, definitely not. He's a good manager. He's won the title. Even I saw some IFK fans when they were losing to Värnamo, I think at 2-1. I saw some tweets saying, "Get him back." So he's still loved there. He won't struggle to get a new role, but I'm not sure if it'll be this season. So yeah, he's a good manager, just maybe the wrong club for him at the wrong time, because I think that, for example, you talk about defense, but that defense is just too many. Dagstad's just come back, now he's leaving again. Varkvist has come back, he might be leaving again. They've lost players. They were unlucky with De Brito, got a cruise ship. He was settling quite well. Abdul Razak obviously moving to Belgium. Like there's so much turnover that it's hard to build a squad when you're just losing players all the time. You're sort of building in quicksand. So yeah, I think he will bounce back, but it's just, I think, wrong club, wrong time for him.
All right, before we finish the Swedish section, we're going to do a little roundup of the teams that have been involved in Europe, and it's been a mixed bag of results for the Swedish clubs. Malmo had a terrible first leg result in the Champions League, losing 1-0 away to Lithuanian side Žalgiris. Winner of that faces Linfield or Buda Glimt. We could get an incredible clash in the next round, but unfortunately both teams lost 1-0 in the first leg, so we need them to turn it around. In the Conference League, Molde beat Elfsborg 4-1. I don't know if we're going to talk about that match in this section or in the Norway section. AI Core lost to a Ukrainian side, Vorskla Poltava. I think that match was actually played in Sweden. It was just across the city in Sweden. So that was a bad first leg result for them, although 3-2 is not too bad. Djurgården had a great win in Rijeka, so mixed bag of results there, Jonathan. Brief thoughts?
There was a bit of a scandal in Rijeka. Joel Asoro got disgusting racial abuse as he got substituted. He gave a little bit back to the fans as well, which fair play to him, in my opinion. But obviously, you might say that sort of goading them a little bit doesn't help. They were chucking stuff at him. It's on video. You can watch the video on Twitter. It's kind of done the rounds. Really just unsavory, unpleasant scenes. Even I think just on that subject, Värnamo I think are putting out a statement apparently tomorrow. I've just read now saying that they're going to address the abuse that Teehee's got for the accusations of max fixing and things like that. That Värnamo are disgusted at that, and they've even said they're going to put out a statement and maybe even report some of the people to the police making these social media comments to Teehee. So yeah, a bit nasty from that point of view. We ran a poll, didn't we, on Twitter, Elfsborg Molde, saying who would win, and I think it was 77% said Molde. So well done to you if you voted Molde. I mean, Elfsborg took an absolute battering, and they're not having a good season. They've actually been a real disappointment to me this season, Elfsborg. I think they've been poor. I know that there's an argument that maybe with the XG and things like that, they should maybe be a little bit better. Some games have kind of gone against them with just errors and things like that. But I was expecting a lot better season from Elfsborg than where they are at the moment in 10th. And I think they probably will finish around eighth maybe, but bad season for them so far. And I think Molde will just finish them off, to be honest. Can't see much going there. Shock result for AIK. I think the team that they played, Steve, hasn't even played football for 6 months. I think I read. I don't think they've had a game.
It was played across the city, wasn't it? The Tele2 Arena.
Yeah, I think there's been obviously with the Ukraine crisis, isn't it? Am I right in saying?
Yeah.
They haven't even played a game. So I don't know how they beat an IFK there, but yeah, that's worrying.
I don't know either.
So not going to, and I've said to you privately, I think Malmo are in real trouble in even getting through to the Champions League group stage. I wouldn't surprise me if they get knocked out.
I heard from several sources they were lucky to only lose 1-0 in Lithuania. I mean, that is a concern. I mean, Zalgiris, they're no mugs, in fairness to them, but
I told you to go against them when they played that team from Iceland, didn't I?
Well, yeah, and I
was nearly right.
Yeah. I really hope both Glimt and Malmo can turn it around. They should turn it around in the second leg. They should. 1-0 is not too bad, especially with no away goals now. So,
well, I'd love to see Glimt Malmo. I mean, that'd be brilliant. But they're kind of. I'd say the Swedish teams are not doing a hugely impressive job so far. A lot to do, except for Djurgården.
I will touch on Molde in the Norwegian section. It was a very impressive result for sure. And before we go, a bit of Allsvenskan fantasy. Just at the minute, congratulations to Frickshow's top of the Nordic Football Podcast League. Albin Johansson in second place, Sixten Enquist in third, and Sam Hart, a former colleague of ours. I hope you're doing well, Sam, if you're listening, in fourth place. But I was just looking at my team for tonight, and I was quite pleased to see Hammarby's clean sheet. But then, because I've got Teehee in my team, and then I saw that he wasn't playing. So I don't know what's going on there, Jonathan. I only recently transferred him into my team, actually, because I was fed up with him, everyone else getting points off Teehee. And now I've heard rumours that he might be leaving Hammarby. I don't know what you can tell us about that.
Yeah, it's kind of almost breaking news this evening, actually. Mohamed Diaz, who we've done a Patreon player profile on. If you are a supporter on Patreon, patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast, you can go and watch that. We did a YouTube video on him and his statistical style when he was linked to Celtic. We've also done a Wisecat blog this month. I've written a Wisecat blog on him. I think it might be the quickest turnaround, Steve, from Wisecat blog to transfer. Because basically this evening he's, according to reports, refused to play for Hammarby tonight. And it's because there's a strong rumour that he's going to Besiktas. They've made a bid for him, which I think Hammarby have either accepted or are considering. So I think there's an element of not wanting to risk him, and also, a move that he probably doesn't want to turn down. I think he has said, in my research for that Wisecat blog, he had said he turned down a few other moves abroad because it wasn't right for him. And he'd said that he doesn't want to play abroad as soon as possible, really. He said he was happy to stay for the rest of the season, but I think, Besiktas, I know you're not big on Turkish football, but I think, the size of that club is big. And I think that's probably a worthwhile move. I think that's probably about as good a move as he could have got. I think I said in the Wisecat blog, there's a few, our partners Wisecat, if you go and check that out, the huddle blog that we do for them, I'm interested to get anyone's thoughts on it. I hope you enjoyed it. But I did mention kind of in possession at times. He can be a little bit ropey in times in possession in his own half. And I think I said in the piece that I feel that his ceiling maybe therefore is kind of mid-table at a top 5 league, or maybe outside the top 5 leagues, a big club outside the top 5 leagues. So I feel like Besiktas is kind of the right move for him in terms of his ceiling, I think. But he's had a brilliant season in Allsvenskan, and he's been one of the best players in the league without a doubt this half season. So, good luck to him. It looks like he's probably getting his move, and I think it's fully deserved. He was really good at Mjällby as well, and I think it's fully deserved for him. He's had a good run in Allsvenskan at 25, so probably time for him to leave.
I would say this is actually a very good move for him. Besiktas are a massive club. I would say they're probably the best supported club in Turkey, actually. They've got the best fans, definitely. A really good environment for him there. And sometimes you just can't turn down a certain move, can you? It just feels right. And I wouldn't blame him for this one at all. He's had a great season. And if he does indeed get a move, then good luck. It's amazing how quickly these players that we write about, Jonathan, just always move on so quickly. It's the way it goes, isn't it? So anyway, yeah, we're at what else?
Yeah, it seems like whenever we have them on our 10 to watch or whatever, they're gone now pretty quickly. So yeah, I mean, if you haven't caught our 10 to watches, then please do support us on Patreon, because we've got 20 players to watch, and I think by the end of the season, most of the 20 will probably have left. So we've got a good success rate this season, haven't we, Steve, so far?
We certainly have. Jonathan. Before we wrap up this section, there's one interesting story about Degerfors player, Georgic. This one. Tell us about this?
Yeah, I couldn't light-hearted end. I know we've gone on massively, I think, but hopefully, Steve, you'll be able to edit some of it. But I couldn't end the section without talking about Nicola George. Someone who might have watched the Elfsborg game months ago when we talked about it, they may remember Georgic as the man who punched the advertising board at halftime and started swearing because they were getting battered, and then got sent off. His nightmare season goes from bad to worse, really, because he missed the game against Sirius. Do you want to know why, Steve?
I don't know. His toenail was cut off or something.
He went to a nightclub in Stockholm the night before the game, got seen out, got found out, and was basically kicked out of the squad, and was not allowed to play. So that
basically had a few too many.
The report, well, just being out the night before a game, I think when they're fighting relegation is bad enough. It was said that the chairman, just a light-hearted note, obviously, the chairman said that the player bus left as usual from Degerfors, but he was in Stockholm. He was supposed to meet the team there, but he broke the protocol rules. And when we found out, we didn't think it was right. And this applies to everyone. If you don't prepare properly, then you go out. And a bit like this podcast, Steve, if you don't prepare properly, you're out the door. So, yeah, no nightclubs before recording for us, and no nightclubs before games for Nicola George.
I think my nightclub days are generally over. Always exceptions, of course. But yes, Georgic, he seems like a proper loose cannon all year, that lad, to be honest.
Yeah, he's had a nightmare. He's been terrible, to be honest.
It doesn't surprise me.
He's still got a contract for one more year. He's 36. So I don't know if they might be looking to cancel that. But in fairness, he said, I want to apologize. I did not drink a drop of alcohol. Yeah, I broke my judgment. Take what you want from that. But yeah, obviously we haven't talked about relegation, and Degerfors, as you'll see, rock bottom of the league. So not what they need right now.
He may not have drunken anything, but I'll tell you what, I'll certainly have whatever he's smoking, Jonathan, because I think he's maybe telling a few porkies there. I don't know. But anyway, yes, that wraps up the Swedish section. We'll be back in part 2. Talk about Eliteserien. So join us after the break.
Welcome to part 2 of this episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. We are halfway through the season. We're halfway through the pod. We're moving over to Norway now. And Steve, it's been a few weeks since we've talked Norway, and there's been a few developments. Take it away, because obviously I think Molde is the place to start really this week, isn't it? We're going to talk about transfers as well in this section. So really this is a kind of a transfer episode because we've had a lot of transfers in both leagues. But I think the place to start really is Molde, isn't it? They've gone on a nice run. They're top of the league now. Obviously, last time we spoke, they were Lillestrøm on top. But Molde have won 3 in a row since then, and really have kind of started to just get a little bit of a grip on the title race, haven't they?
I think this. You talk about the 5-way battle in Allsvenskan. I think it's a 3-way league battle in Norway. Molde, Lillestrøm, and I think Bodø/Glimt still have to be considered in that race. They do have a game in hand. They are 8 points off Molde. With that game in hand, win that and they're down to 5, and that is, you're certainly still in it. So yeah, Molde have done well. They've won, I think they're unbeaten, in 11 games. I think they've won 8 of those. They've not been perfect. They dropped some strange points against HamKam and Jerv recently. And they were nearly dropped points against Sandefjord actually at the weekend and needed a late goal. They've missed a lot of chances recently, Molde. They should be scoring even more goals than they have been. And at some point, I think that will come back to bite them. But they've got to be very pleased with their season. This change of formation at the moment has been very much justified by the manager. And they've had injuries as well, so it's not gone completely to plan that way. So, yeah, they've done pretty well. At the moment, they're the favourites for the title, but there was a period last year, remember, where they had that lead on Bodø/Glimt and eventually they let slip the title. So they've got to make sure that they don't do the same again. And of course, Lillestrøm are only 3 behind them with a game in hand. So there's another team in the mix this year. But by and large, I think Molde, I've been quite impressed with them. They've been good to watch as per usual. Nice side under Erling Moe. And at the moment, like I say, they are in the driving seat.
Yeah, I mean, in the Conference League, of course, we talked about it a little bit in part one. They battered Elfsborg 4-1, kind of dispatched them. Goals from Kassa, Haugen, Breivik, and Mansverk. After going 1-0 down, turned it around quite well. Followed that up this weekend, just gone with a 3-2 win at Sandefjord, Steve. This goal game was kind of a late winner, wasn't it? I saw you commenting on Twitter, Brynildsen. Just tell us how this game went, because like you said, they're kind of scoring quite a lot of goals at the moment as well, aren't they? I mean, that's 7 goals in their last 2 games. And if you go back a little bit more, they beat Tromsø 5-1 as well. So, they're kind of racking up goals at the moment, aren't they, as well?
Yeah, and they should be scoring even more as well, because there's strong rumours linking them to Strømsgodset striker Lars Jørgen Salvesen, target man striker. And I don't think they've ever really replaced Ohi yet, to be honest. And David Datro Fofana, I mean, I could spend an hour just talking about him, Jonathan, because he's famously been in my 10 to watch for the last 2 years, controversially in it this year, of course. And I'm totally regretting putting him in, because this guy is so inconsistent. It's crazy. But one thing he doesn't do, he doesn't finish chances very well. He does a lot of good things as well, but he doesn't finish one-on-ones and things. They're really missing a clinical striker, I think, and that would move their offense to an even higher level of more goals. So if they can bring in like Salvesen or a proven striker, like sort of poacher type striker, then that will really help them. Because at the end of the day, they only score 1 goal combined against Yeovil HamKam, and they might look back at the end of the season and think, you know what, that was really, really costly. But certainly since then, they've found a form again. Wolf Eikram came into the team off the bench a couple of those games and made a difference. And I have to say the performance against Elfsborg second half was as good as I've seen Molde for quite some time. They just absolutely obliterated them. I think they could have scored even more. And I know Elfsborg are not having the greatest year, but it was from 1-0 down. I think Molde were seriously impressive in that game. I would not be surprised to see them, if they get a good draw, I could see them making the Conference League group stages.
Interesting, big prediction there. Molde you weren't massive on them, were you? At times this season, but it sounds like they're kind of impressing you of late. I mean, we will move on in a bit, but just on what you said there about Datro Fofana, you're never done before, never hopefully to be repeated. Having him in 2 10 to watches, scandalous. We called it out at the time, but you said you allowed it. I don't think you allowed it next year. But yeah, just on him, I mean, he's only 19 years old, to be fair to him. He's top of the expected goals in League Serien, in fact, 8.71 XG, but only 6 goals. So as you mentioned there, he's kind of underperforming slightly compared to his XG. And if you compare it to the 2 others, and this leads me on to my question coming. Amal Pellegrino, 7.84 XG according to Wyscout, 13 goals scored. I mean, that's a crazy overperformance. He's smashing it. And then 3rd place, Veton Berisha, 7.27 XG, 8 goals. So if you compare Berisha to Fofana, I mean, Berisha's 28, let's be fair, Fofana 19. But still, it does tell a little bit of a story. Now, Berisha, we did say, obviously, we mentioned that he's moving to Hammarby. Deal is done. I'm very excited to see how this player does, because we've talked about him a lot, especially from a fantasy point of view. He's kind of been in people's fantasy teams, been the captain and things like that, hasn't he? A lot of talk. But we do have a question again from Luis de Almeida, who's a loyal follower of this podcast and listener. And he says, Viking, another solid campaign for the top 3, but they've lost Berisha. Are their ambitions threatened, or do they have what it takes to keep fighting? 2-part question this. So, I mean, there's another question about Rosenborg, but I'll come to that later. But just on Viking, how will they be affected by losing 8-goal man Berisha?
Massively, because he's not just a goal scorer, he was the heartbeat of the team. And they'll bring in a replacement, but he is irreplaceable. His goals perhaps could be, you could replace those, but I just don't think what else he gave to the club can be, that is a huge loss. And they also sold talented young midfielder Wilhelmsen to Brøndby in Denmark. So, 2 big hits in one window. Yeah, they got decent money, I suppose, nearly £3 million for those two combined. But, they keep losing their top talents, Viking. Joe Bell was one they lost. And you can't keep doing that, Jonathan. And I kind of feel for them because I think if they kept players fit this year, kept these guys, they probably could have made a title run. But despite being fourth now, they played 2 games more than Lillestrøm and Bodø/Glimt. I expect them to sort of drop down to maybe 5th this year now, maybe even below. It all depends who they bring in as replacements. So they've got a big August to come in the transfer window. They've still got Trippic, although he's had injury problems this year. But yeah, I don't think, to answer the question, I don't really think Viking have got what it takes now to be in that title race.
And just a quick follow-up question, Steve. For fantasy players, Eliteserien Fantasy, looking for a Berisha replacement, who are you going for? Because obviously Viking lost 4-2 at the weekend to Vålerenga. They played Traore and Free Johnson up front. I mean, from a like I say, from a fantasy point of view, who would you be looking on as a replacement?
Well, you probably, absolutely hate to say this, but you probably have to put Datro Fofana in your team because he's in the side that's creating a heck of a lot of chances. Remember, Pellegrino's a midfielder in the game. So you've got to you probably need Pellegrino at some point although he's an injury risk as well. But Fofana, at some point, I just know as soon as I take him out of my team, he's going to get a random hat-trick somewhere because this guy gets a lot of chances. But he's so infuriating. Like I say, he's only 19. But I think when someone is hyped so much and expectations are so high, I think we can expect a little bit better, even if you're quite young. And he doesn't deliver on the finishing point of view. But I actually think he's more of a natural winger. Doesn't really suit a 3-5-2 system. But yeah, because Molde are not doing a lot of rotation at the moment, he seems to play all the games. He's quite a fit lad. I think you're probably going to have to get him in that team, really, because at some point he will surely, just by sheer, XG numbers, get in there and get himself some goals. Although if Salverson did join them, then Salverson maybe could be looked at as well. They might do more of a rotation then. But at the moment, I know he's quite an expensive player, but it's one of those, if you don't have him in and he starts to get goals and assists and stuff, and you might lose ground on the opposition in fantasy.
He's only 19, but his mind is old. So any hip hop fans, you might be able to relate to the quote. Tweet us if you know what lyric that is from. I'm not going to spoil it, but yeah, no, fair play to Fofana. I think, like you said, sounds like to be fair to me, he's got the highest XG in the league, so he must be doing something right to a certain extent, but maybe the finishing isn't quite there. And like you said, it can be a bit frustrating at times, can't it? If you've got someone like that in your team or you're riding on them. Let's move on. Steve, I'm going to give you the choice here, and then let you decide what we talk about next, because we can either move on to Bodø/Glimt or we can move on to transfers. We've got a big show this week, so where do you want to take this now?
Well, I think let's go to Bodø/Glimt now, and because they are starting to find some form domestically, but it's more, I think, in the Champions League qualifiers. I actually want to talk about Glimt because it's a bit worrying that they've lost. They lost in the Faroe Islands to the champions of the Faroes, KI 3-1. Only prevailed 4-3 on aggregate. It was a really close run thing. They nearly were pushed to extra time, and then they went and lost 1-0 against Linfield in Northern Ireland. They should never have lost.
What has gone on here?
I have to say, by the way, Northern Irish football is the most boring in the world. Their national team is generally the worst team to watch for entertainment. It's 0-0 or 1-0, isn't it, every single time? And I tell you what, their club teams obviously play the same way, because this lot just parked a treble-decker bus, and they did have no intention to play whatsoever. Bear in mind, Bodø/Glimt had lost 3-1 in the Faroe Islands the week before. You'd think you'd have a go. I thought it was a horrible game plan, but they looked out because there was a terrible mistake by Høybråten 10 minutes from time, who let in one of their attackers, and they scored and they won 1-0. It really infuriates me, Jonathan, when a team who was so negative needlessly actually get a reward. I hate it.
It got them a result. They got them the win. They go to Norway with a chance of qualifying.
It's awful, isn't it?
So, Yeah, I did see you were a bit angry about it on Twitter as well. So,
Wow, it does my head in, but they got a result somehow. There's no way a draw would have been anywhere near enough. 1-0 gives them somewhat of a chance. But it was worrying from Bodø Glimt. There's been at times this year where they just haven't been able to break down sort of really robust teams. It's like if Pellegrino didn't start that game, by the way. If he's not around, he's such a key man for Glimt. He's got the X factor and flair. And they beat Jør 5-0 a weekend, and I think that was probably a good dress rehearsal for the match against Linfield, really. But they looked a lot better there. But in some games this year, they just haven't had it. They've really struggled to break down teams, and I think this is the culmination of kind of losing players and not really replacing them adequately yet. And they've done fantastically well, don't get me wrong, the last few years, but sometimes you can just sell too many, can't you? Or lose too many players. And it's a little bit of a concern to me. I'm just not really sure I see them qualifying for the Champions League group stages, which would be a heck of an achievement anyway. Let's just say we can't have expected that of them anyway. If they do beat Linfield or get progress past Linfield, they're guaranteed a spot in at least the Conference League group, so which would be something, wouldn't it? But I've seen it before. Last year they lost to the Polish champions in the first round of this. It's frustrating. I really hope they can just make sure they do a professional job against Linfield on Wednesday and get the job done. But a few little gremlins.
Well, I mean, there's one thing about you, Steve. You're very good at upsetting listeners from different countries based around Bodø Glimt. I think Roma fans, now the whole of Northern Ireland. I think the further Bodø Glimt go on, the more hated we're going to become.
Well,
but no, I mean, let's be fair. Yeah, surely they're going to turn that around. I mean, they followed it up with a 5-0 win against Jør. They're kind of obviously the third down the table, but they're 8 points behind Molde with a game in hand. In a short answer, maybe, can they win the title?
They still could, because Molde will remember last year and know that Bodø Glimt can turn it around. There's a massive. The big thing is where do these two teams end up in Europe? Do Bodø Glimt get in a group stage somewhere? Do Molde get in a group stage somewhere? I think if it's a case of Bodø Glimt are in Europe group stages and Molde are not, I think you've got to say Molde win it, because at some point Glimt will at least have a couple of poorer performances domestically on the back of a trip to the Far East or something of Europe. But if Molde are doing the same, then it kind of evens it out a bit, doesn't it? And Lillestrøm still in the Europe as well, beat the Swedish side SJK. So look, there's a lot of things to do that, but Bodø Glimt, they can't be ruled out. And a few weeks ago, you almost were thinking they can't win the gold this year, but there's a resilience about this team. You can never ever write it off, and let's not rule out them making some moves in the August transfer window either. So let's see where the teams stand at the end of August. But I think it's a three-way race. I don't see Viking staying in it now, and I don't really see Rosenborg doing quite enough long term to be in that race for gold. But Molde, Lillestrøm, Bodø Glimt for me.
Great stuff. And if you're from Northern Ireland, I love you. Don't worry. Great country. So
I bet you don't love their national football team though. I mean, seriously.
Let's move on. No. Let's move on. We got enough to talk about. You've made your point. We need to discuss transfers, because I mentioned before the break in part one. By the way, I went back and did a little bit of research, Steve. 2020 summer transfer expenditure in Allsvenskan, 670,000. Transfer expenditure last summer in Allsvenskan, this is without undisclosed fees, of course, but 2.7 million. This year, 6.075 million. So that's nearly treble the amount spent over last season. So, just to give a bit of context there, like I mentioned, there's been crazy expenditure this season. But let's move over to Eliteserien, because it's not been without its dramas either. Eliteserien transfer market. There's a lot going on. Some of them leaving even for Sweden, which is nice to see. Berisha, one of the best players in the league, that doesn't happen too often. Let's take a look at the summer transfers so far, because as we've said, there's been a lot going on. Teams may be opening up in terms of their expenditure. I know that just according to Transfermarkt, there's been 8.5 million worth of sales out of Norway. But how has that affected kind of the market? Tell us about the key transfers maybe that you'd like to speak about, and let's take a look at this summer transfer window because that's the aim of this episode.
Well, the window isn't actually officially open in Norway yet, so I think that we're going to get plenty of ins come in August. So, but I think there's a couple of worrying departures, and I'll give you an example. Jonathan Linseth from Sarpsborg to CSKA Sofia, however you pronounce it over there. Now, for me, that just screams that's a weird move. Now, I don't deny that they're probably the biggest club in their own country, but it's not exactly like, the guy, Jahiza to Besiktas, is it? I don't really see what Linseth is gaining going there. I'm like, it kind of raises questions. Sigurd Hågen has moved to Denmark. Was it Aalborg or Aarhus? Someone like that. They got 1.35 million. He was linked with moves to several Norwegian teams like Molde, Glimt, Rosenborg, and I think I kind of expected him to go there really rather than to Denmark. And obviously Berisha and Sebulonson have moved from Viking. Vålerenga have lost a couple of players. Kjartansson on a free. Nasberg's moving to Cyprus at the end of this month. I don't know. It's just there's a couple of strange ones, and I hope that some teams kind of rebound in this August window and sign players. There will be some signings, no doubt. At the moment, really, it's just kind of rumours and things along those sort of lines. Leo Kornic, I think, to Rosenborg's one that caught my eye this evening. But at the moment, it's sort of we're in this departure stage pre the window opening.
Yes, we got Sebulonson on your list. Berisha, Sigurd Haugen, Jonathan Linseth, Kjartansson, Nasberg as sort of key transfers out. In terms of top three, which are the three that kind of most going to affect their teams? And obviously who they play for, what position, that kind of thing. Just for context for the listener. Obviously
Berisha, one of the best strikers in Elite Serien. For Viking to lose him, as we've said, massively impactful. And I think at the moment he's irreplaceable for them, really. So that is a huge loss for them. Sigurd Hågen as well from Ålesund to Aarhus, that was it, 1.35 million. And Uwe Rosler's Aarhus, I think, isn't it? There is Rosler. But I don't think they can really replace him either. He was just like a massive part of their offense. And he's sort of like a three-dimensional striker who will be a massive, massive loss for Ålesund. And so I think those are the two at the moment. They're the two really big losses. And Kjartansson from Vålerenga is an interesting one because when he came back into Vålerenga a couple of years ago, he was kind of seen as this next, he was going to be the guy that can propel them to even perhaps a title challenge. But it hasn't worked out for him in this season, especially. He was quite poor, and I kind of saw the writing on the wall maybe as much as 12 months ago when he started missing chances that you wouldn't expect him to miss. And I have to say, it's been a bit of a flop, Kjartansson, in his recent spell with Vålerenga, and it doesn't surprise me. He's left on currently a free agent, and they've lost players like the goalkeeper Kjetil Haug as well. Obviously, Nasberg is on his bike, and Aaron Donham went back on loan, didn't really work out there either. So they've got a big August coming up. I think there's several teams have got a big August coming up where they're gonna have to bring players in.
Yeah, fair enough. Some big names kind of leaving. I think, as you mentioned there, it's probably not as big a discussion about transfer because, like you say, the window's not open yet. I mean, Sebastian Sebulonson, as you mentioned there, is, he's made his departure and a few others, but it doesn't seem like, to go to Bromby, doesn't seem like there's many incomings at the moment. So we'll keep an eye on it. I mean, Konradson side as well going to Sassuolo. I think, was that already done? Maybe that might have already been done.
Yeah, I think he was on loan there, and he's like 3 million transfer complete now. So yeah. So
we'll keep an eye on it transfer wise. There's no one else you really want to mention. If not, we'll move on to Kristiansund.
Yeah, Kristiansund, who are now up at 2 points. Jonathan, they picked up a draw against Odd at the weekend. They were 2-0 up though, and they let it slip. And I read an interesting article a week or so ago about their finances at Kristiansund and how they're actually in a bit of trouble. Despite their overachieving finishes recently, recent seasons, they've had to put together a strategy and a plan, which kind of has limited their ability in the transfer window in the last sort of couple of transfer windows. And I didn't realize they had issues there, Kristiansund, but we kind of forget that they're quite a small club, 3,000-4,000 capacity stadium. They're not going to have a bottomless pit of gold, are they? And they're certainly better than a 2-point team, no doubt about it. But the manager, Christian Mikkelsen's actually come under a bit of fire recently for probably the first time in his reign there. He switched to a 3-5-2 formation. They cannot stop conceding goals. They're averaging, I think, 2.3 goals per game conceding. And that is just the way to relegation, isn't it? And they've got a lot of games in hand. 2 to 3 games in hand on some other teams. So all is not completely lost yet. But I think they've got to kind of prepare for relegation, really. They still haven't won a game of football this season in the Eliteserien, Jonathan. And although they have shown some better recent signs, they've got a huge match on Wednesday against Sandefjord. They really need the 3 points in that one. I think they're starting to show some signs of goals in them now. And this switch to 3-5-2 maybe has been a smart move. But yeah, I mean, if you'd said to me they'd be winless after 13 games, I'd have said no way, not after recent years.
I mean, they're toast, aren't they? Let's face it. I mean, they're 11 points off even the relegation playoff. They're 14 points off getting out of it. I mean, Haugesund, obviously they've got 3 games in hand on them, but I mean, they're toast, aren't they?
If they get out of this is the greatest escape since Clint Eastwood got out of Alcatraz. Escape from Alcatraz.
Spoilers, mate. I've not seen it.
But yeah, I mean, this would be incredible if they were to get out. I'm not actually completely ruling them out though, Jonathan, because I tell you what, I think Jörver will go down automatically, and all it takes is one other side to just have a shocking run, and you just never know. But yeah, they realistically they are brown bread, aren't they? It's a shame. It's a shame for them because they've had such a great number of years overachieving. To go to this, it almost feels wrong, doesn't it?
Yeah, the year that you finally are quite nice to them, and the year that I sort of start thinking I might support them, they go and get relegated. So maybe we should stick to the blueprint on this podcast. You being really mean and me sitting on the fence.
I've been really nice to them all year. Even now, I'm kind of defending them, aren't I? It's incredible, mate. It's incredible.
They're not used to this sort of Steve Wyss being nice to them. So,
I know.
And me deciding to sort of be a bit partial to them. Mate, I'm going to stick to I'll never support a team again after this, I don't think.
They need to stick with the manager, in my opinion. He's done a lot of good work here, and I really hope he's given this season, even if you go down, so what? Build again, get rid of him there if you want, maybe move on, but he's a really good manager, in my opinion.
Yeah, and goals from Hotmark, B, Jorgensen and Ruud in that game, 2-2 draw with Odd, not really helping them too much, to be honest, and Odd, for their part, sat right in the middle of the table pretty much in 9th place. Steve, let's move on. Vålerenga's revival and Tromsø some concerns. Let's keep it quite brief, but what's going on here?
I didn't see this coming from Vålerenga. I mean, I said, I think in the most recent episode, or certainly before they started winning, that Dag Ole Fagermo, if it was me, I would have sacked him. And I think a lot of other people had that same opinion. Not because he was a bad manager, but I just thought his time was done. You just feel that it's best for both parties to move on. I just didn't see how he could get much else out of this team. But they got a win against Kristiansund 3-0, and they were kind of gifted a couple of goals in that. But they got the win. And I think just getting a win massively improved the confidence, the whole mood and morale in the whole club. And then they beat Sarpsborg away 1-0, and they beat Viking 4-2. There was a fantastic tactical performance against Sarpsborg. He really showed his managerial class and astute tactician in that game. He shut down one of the best offenses in the league. It was a really good performance, and I was dead impressed with their organisation, discipline. And then against Viking, 4-2 at the weekend, that was as good as I've seen Vålerenga play in a long time. They were brilliant. Sauri he's come under quite a lot of criticism this year for his lack of finishing. Got them an equaliser, and he was brilliant all day. They could have posted 6 or 7 up on Viking, and I know Viking had a tough trip to Prague, but I was dead impressed with Vålerenga in this game. And, Fagermo at the moment, fair play. For him to have kind of sucked up this criticism, I was not sure he could get much of a tune out of this team anymore, I'll be honest. But he's really done work wonders in the last few weeks. Still a long way to go. Don't get me wrong. They're still well below expectations, and you can't say, they're back or anything. But at the moment, for now, he silenced his critics. And, at the moment, I will tip my hat to him.
Yeah, fair play, because you've been saying for several weeks now that, he might get sacked. It might even be a good thing if he does get sacked. So, it's always good to see managers sort of finding their way out of a brown paper bag, really, isn't it? And I don't mean whiskey. But Tromsø, you're a little bit worried about. I mean, if you look at their sort of recent run of form, they're now relegation playoffs, 14th place. They've had a few games postponed, haven't they, according to what I'm looking at now, but haven't actually won since May.
Yeah, you know what? Pre-season, I think I predicted them third bottom, I think, and there were several people were like, "Well, how can you have Tromsø that low?" And even I was kind of questioning myself, to be honest. But yeah, they've had a lot of draws, and it's an example of where draws sometimes can do you no good. You've got to have some wins as well, but they've been especially worrying in the last two games. I know it was Molde and Rosenborg away, but they were really, really poor in both matches, and that wasn't the Tromsø that I'm kind of used to. And they might be on this sort of second season syndrome a bit, and it can be difficult, Jonathan, really. And there's been rumours of August Mikkelsen, their star sort of young attacker, leaving the club to either Bodø/Glimt or Molde, or Rosenborg, in fact. But Tromsø have turned that down, and I don't think the player himself wants to go to Bodø/Glimt. I mean, they lost Espejord there, well, not directly, but I think that hurt. And to lose Mikkelsen to one of their top, their big rivals, Bodø/Glimt, would really hurt. He'd be a great fit at Bodø/Glimt, by the way. Wouldn't be surprised at all if Glimt tried to really poach him this August. But I don't know. The feeling around Tromsø is not great at the moment. They've got games in hand. I think they'll have enough to survive but just a few. It's almost out of nowhere, really, because they were unbeaten in about 7 consecutive games. Suddenly now they're in that playoff position, and it just shows you how quickly things can change. They've got a couple of favourable fixtures coming up, which they need to get results in. They've got Sandefjord and then Kristiansund, so that needs to be at least 4 points from that, Jonathan. Otherwise, I think you really can be concerned.
Are they a team that you expect to maybe dip into the market when it opens?
I don't think they've got a lot of resources, to be honest. They never have done up there, and that's another concern. It's not the most attractive place to go. It's in the Arctic Circle, and it's quite limited what sort of transfers they can get sometimes. And I don't see them being particularly active in the window. They need a better finisher, though. That's for sure. Moses Abi is just not clinical enough, and has missed several chances. Like I say, something just don't quite feel right. And my gut, a gut feeling in football, you sense that you're just not sure which way it could go. And I'm just getting a bit worried for them, Jonathan. Call it a sixth sense, the meat man's sixth sense. I feel it's going to be a real graft for them toward the end of the season now to hang in there.
Forget meat man soccer. I might have to rename you sixth sense soccer. But it's looking tough for them. And I'll never forget Tom Dent's interview when he was, I think it was Tom Dent, when he was talking about Bodø/Glimt and saying, that part of the world, you've got to get almost three boats and stuff like that. You've got to get a boat, a train, and a plane to get to any sort of game. It's crazy, isn't it? Really, sometimes you don't think about the geography involved in and how that affects player recruitment potentially. But let's move on. A few more talking points before we wrap this one up. And Steve, I've been doing this podcast with you, I think now for 5 years nearly, and never in my life have I heard you say to me, Jonathan, I want to talk about the OBOS Ligaen. In fact, I think you've resisted it so many times. I've said to you, what's going on in the second tier? And you're like, no, don't want to know about it. But it's here on our itinerary. OBOS Ligaen roundup, Steve. I mean, what's happened now? First you go vegan, now OBOS. It's like a new man.
I tell you, I've been following the OBOS this year, and it's a mad league. The goals in this league. Let's just say I've been betting on it, and I've been doing rather well in it. And there's some good teams and some good players in it this year. And Brann, we've got to give them a shout out. I think there was a question about them as well. And they've won 13 out of 16 games. They're unbeaten, and I think they could genuinely join. They could have an invincible campaign. They're that good in this level. They're 11 points clear. Before
you go on, because I mean, it sounds like you're gearing up for your big answer. Let's answer that question.
Right.
Because it's a great question, I think, from @P2P Alex. He's asked a question before, so it's really good to see you back, Alex. Hope you're enjoying the show. He says, and obviously, you've already sort of touched on it, but he says, Brann looks set for a swift return to the top league. Are they that good, or is the second division that bad? So you can obviously incorporate what you're saying about Brann there and their incredible run into your answer.
I actually think they're very, very, very good this year. I think if they're that same squad now as an Eliteserien, they'd probably be comfortably mid-table, because they're in a much more settled place, and they've got players like, Bård Finner. I don't think he even regularly starts for them. He's the top scorer, or one of the top scorers in the league. They've got quality all over the park. Nicholas Castro, Rasmussen's, I think, has a great year. They've got a couple of defenders who would easily start in the Eliteserien. Knudsen, for example. They're very good. There are some bad teams in OBOS, certainly the bottom part of it, but I actually think the top 6 or 7 are not bad, to be honest. And like Stabæk are pretty strong. Ranheim are decent. Sogndal, who are managed by ex-Chelsea man Tor-Andre Flo, are worth watching. There's a lot of some very good attack-minded sides in this OBOS league. The ones at the bottom, I've got to be honest, the semi-pro sides are a bit crap, like Grorud and Skeid and Stjørdals-Blink. I'm going to talk about Stjørdals-Blink in a minute, and Bryn. But yeah, I think it's a bit of both, really, to answer that question. But heck of a side. But there's some good, there's some good teams, there's some good players in OBOS in the top 5 or 6. I love how attack-minded all the teams are. There's so many. If you want goals, this is the place for you. It's absolutely mental how many are scored. Really, it's like no one really wants to defend. But Brann at the minute looks set to absolutely waltz this league. I'd really be interested to see if they can actually go unbeaten for the whole campaign.
What happens, Steve? It's almost like some magical formula happens when teams get relegated. We had Lillestrøm, didn't we? And we had other teams. It seems like when you go down, some sort of magic potion happens where you sort your whole club out, and the next year you come up and you're fighting for the title. You mentioned Castro there, a few other changes. You've said you've been watching the league. What exactly is going on with Brann? Did they have a change of management? I know last year the sex party and everything was a lot of laughter about Brann, wasn't there? Why is it the team sort of seem to go down and then think to themselves, right, let's sort all our problems out? Why don't they do that during a season? Like what's kind of going on there? And is there a wider trend of that? Is it like, I'm a bit confused about that, because it seems like a recurring theme, doesn't it?
Well, when you go down from Eliteserien to OBOS, half of the OBOS league is semi-pro. So already you've got a massive advantage. I think nearly every side that's gone down from Eliteserien has been a fully professional side, apart from Mjøndalen. So already you've got a huge advantage there. And sometimes going down does you some good. They've stuck with Erik Horneland, who's a very experienced manager. And, but he was Rosenborg manager just 2 or 3 years ago, this same stage. I think if they'd had him the whole of last season, they would have stayed up. Somehow they lost that playoff game to Jerv, despite absolutely battering them. But I think going down, sometimes a reset can do you quite good. When you start winning games of football, it does you good. Your confidence is up. And look, Brann are a big club in Norway. They know they were the big favourites. But sometimes that can be a huge target on your back. Sides like Lillestrøm didn't absolutely waltz this league. They just kind of did enough to go up. But when Arlesund were famous for this, weren't they? They'd been the yo-yo when they were in this league. They just smashed it. And I think Brann are going to do exactly the same. But I think it's quite an easy league to come down to. You can reset quite easily. It's not like sometimes going down to the Premier League. And I know some clubs instantly bounce back, like with parachute payments. But for some, like Stoke or someone, it can be a real drop down. And a bit brutal, really. Like the Panthers are attacking you. But in OBOS, it's quite tame, really, a bit more. It doesn't work for everyone, but for Brann, sides like that, it looks like they're going to make a very swift return.
You've mentioned you're really enjoying the OBOS, and there's a good answer there, and interesting stuff. Obviously, you mentioned they're semi-pro. Makes you wonder how some of those teams are competitive if there's such a sort of gap. But it brings us on to one of the other things we wanted to talk about in OBOS, and that's Stjørdals-Blink. Seems like some problems there.
Do you know what? This makes me almost worry about quite sort of lower league finances in clubs, because what's happened at Stjørdals-Blink is they've run into some financial issues, and there was a meeting and they asked the squad and management to basically take on a minimum salary wage for the rest of the season. I'm not quite sure how much that is in Norwegian terms, but the club was under threat of survival. And obviously some players couldn't agree to that. It's only semi-pro there, but you've got to make a living. And 6 or 7 players have left the club in the last 2 or 3 weeks because they didn't agree to these terms, and the club simply had to let them go because they couldn't afford to pay them anymore. And it's a reminder of kind of existence in football is the most important thing first and foremost, isn't it? And they'll almost certainly will be going down. Bear in mind, they survived by the skin of their teeth last year in the playoff match. Tom Dent was the manager there. Maybe he saw this coming. Who knows? And that's why he jumped ship to HamCam. Well, one of the reasons, maybe. Who knows? But I wish them well. I really do wish them well. I think that it's going to be really brutal second half of the season for them. I don't know if they can bring in any loans, maybe completely for free, that might help them. But financially, it just kind of made reminder that in the lower leagues here, it can be really, really challenging. Even I'm sure they've been well run, but you can still get into a lot of trouble if you're not careful.
I mean, maybe you're not best placed to answer this, but can a team like Blink afford to kind of bring in? You just mentioned there maybe some loans and things like that. I guess it would have to be low budget players, I imagine.
Well, they've obviously lost a massive core of their squad. I think they've lost the top scorer. 3 or 4 starting defenders have moved on as well. The only way they could get a reinforcements is loans for nothing, like youngsters from some elitist teams who are willing to pay the wages, things like that, and all that lot. So I don't know whether they can bring anyone in August for that. Maybe they can, but the thing is, there's 3 teams at the bottom who are awful. Stjørdals-Blink, Groe, and Skeid. They're on 6 and 7 points respectively. The team that finished 14th will be in a relegation playoff match, and one of those 3 will potentially have a chance to survive. So on the field, they've still got a chance. This could be the lowest points ever needed to get in that playoff position. So you just never know, do you? But worrying times for Stjørdals-Blink, sadly.
Well, from one guest we're coming up, David Salini of Värnamo, to one guest we've had in the past, Tom Dent, who's now at HamCam assistant manager. We'll wrap it up there. Go into our archives if you fancy it. Have a little look back, because obviously we've had a lot of special guests. I think we've had about 30 guests overall now. I was doing a bit of maths the other day, and we hope to have a few more before the season's out. But stay tuned for David Salini later this week, and also follow us on Twitter at Nordic Foot Pod. Stay tuned for a weekend preview show. We'll have some bonus episodes for you and bonus content. And you can follow us on patreon.com/Nordic Football Podcast. So, I think we're pretty much done for this week. Great to talk to you, Steve, and catch up. I've missed you, to be honest.
I've missed you. It's been good. It's been a good show. I say thanks for all your support out there. Feel free to get in touch anytime, anyone. Follow us on the socials at Nordic Football, at Meatman Soccer, at JF Football, Henry as well at Football in DK. But really enjoyed it being with you, Jonathan. It's good to have you back, and roll on what I'm sure will be a very interesting summer in Scandinavia.
Yes, it's heating up now. I'm really excited. If you haven't been able to catch games yet, then I definitely recommend it because it's good. 2 little final points. Good luck, England against Sweden. Big game that. I mean, I might stay on the fence, but huge game in the Women's Euros semi-final coming out this week. So, if anyone's been watching that, England and Sweden will meet in the semi-final. I've been enjoying the quality, actually. I've been watching some of the games, decent quality. And also, Steve, just wanted to finally, before we leave, get your prediction. We have to do it. It's a inter-Norway-Sweden game. Elfsborg Molde. What are you thinking?
2-1 or 3-1. 2-1 or 3-1 to Molde. I think they'll comfortably win.
Really? So you're thinking 8? So you're saying 8-2 on aggregate, basically?
Well, yeah. I just think they'll hit them on the counter attack. To be honest, wow. They won't just go there to defend. Yeah,
I'm going to say 2-2. But
I could see that as well. Yeah.
But I think good luck to Glimt and Molde. Good luck to Glimt and Malmö, because that would be fantastic, wouldn't it?
If we get that tie, it's big. Yeah.
2 champions head to head. I mean, that would be cream of the crop for the Nordic Football Podcast. But bit of work to do for both at the moment. But that'll be all for this week. Thanks so much. You can find Steve on Twitter, as you've mentioned, and myself if you want to leave any comments. You can comment on YouTube as well. Our YouTube channel continues to grow. And you can listen to your podcast there as well if you prefer that to audio and to the sort of, the Spotify and the iTunes traditional pods. So we'll be back. But for now, that's all for us. And stay tuned, like I say, later this week. David Salini. I enjoyed it a lot. Thank you, David. So goodbye, everyone, from me. Thanks, Steve. Good to see you again. Take care.
Yeah, take care, everyone. Goodbye. See you next time.